what's our intro?
Christian.
Aurora.
What do you want to talk about today?
Books. We're going to talk about books. We agreed on that in the basement.
We already agreed, you're right. What kind of, so tell me.
I wanted to call this the basement, but Aurora's against it. Anyway.
Who is your favorite author and why is it Dorothy Dunnett?
Well, it's funny because I'm going to say my favorite author is J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh, okay.
But let's talk about Dorothy Dunnett if you want. It's true. Can't we have multiple favorite authors?
I definitely think we're going to have multiple favorite authors.
Okay, so Patrick O'Brien.
Sure.
Dorothy Dunnett. J.R.R. Tolkien. Alistair Reynolds. Lois McMaster Bujold. Those are the ones I came prepared to talk about.
That's good. Yeah, I would say Ian M. Banks.
Oh.
I know. Dorothy Dunnett, obviously. Lois McMaster Bujold, absolutely. And then Terry Pratchett. And then you. And I'm not just saying that.
Wow. He's still in my heart.
Yeah, exactly.
So clearly you want to talk about Dorothy Dunnett. So let's start with Dorothy Dunnett. A little information. You've probably never heard of Dorothy Dunnett if you're watching this. She was a romantic historical author in the 60s and 70s, almost as popular as Tolkien when her books came out. Rigorous researcher, a little bit melodramatic, and I think it's worth saying that almost everybody we've ever read who we like reads Lois. So if you've ever read The Sparrow...
Oh my god, yeah, Mary Dory Russell.
Yeah.
I failed everybody. Yes, one of my other favorites.
So she was just a great writer, and she set a pattern for writing that is complicated because she does a lot of very complicated character interaction. She really cares about relationships, some of which are very, very torrid. Let's leave that aside.
I was going to say sordid, yeah.
Sordid, yeah. Don't want to wreck it for you, but examined in incredible detail some good, well-written romance, and I don't mean drippy. I think there's 2 sex scenes in 10,000 pages.
She gives a pretty off-screen.
Pretty off-screen. And she writes a good fight scene, too.
She writes a great fight scene. She writes a good chase scene. She loves a snowy chase. Yeah, it's funny to me that people don't know about her because I think a lot of the book talk romance crew might really enjoy Dorothy Dunnett, except that the investment is so high. Some of her books, you have to read 200 pages for the payoff. You have to read 200 pages to get to the plot, which can be daunting. But once you figure out how good the payoff is going to be, it is worth it. And most of her books are 1,000 pages.
When I was in high school, I was trying to get all the guys and gals that I knew to read Dorothy Dunnett. And back then, Game of Kings was her first historical novel. And I swear 7 of my 8 best friends stopped on page 47 when the main character lays siege to his mother's castle. And it's kind of hard to get past that point because he's clearly a horrible person. Anyway, good times.
That was the Lyman Chronicles?
Yeah.
Yeah, which it took me, Lyman was my first, that book was my first try, and it took me, a while to get into it, but you said it was worth it, so I was okay, and by the end, I'm, bawling, and so, my whole life is wrapped up in this series and these characters, and, I think I borderline got PTSD from that series later on.
So I want to say a kind of weird thing about this, because one of the things that fascinates me as a military historian, and that I constantly want to write about when I'm writing, okay, by the way, I'm a writer if you don't know that. Anyway, is why battles happen. One of the things that drives me nuts in other people's books is battles happen and you're armies don't just line up. And I learned that from Dorothy Dunnett. Dorothy Dunnett explores how you get to the fight scene. And I remember thinking when I was first reading your books, I have never read anyone doing this. Because Helm's Deep from J.R.R. Tolkien. Okay, it's a big battle. Why does it happen? Anyway. Well, I could give you a strategy and tactics lecture where Saruman just bypasses Helm's Deep and moves on. But
he didn't have good strategy advisors. But she was also, her research was top notch.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are other people doing research like that now. But her commitment to understanding the history is part of why her books are so cool. And you can learn history reading them, which is one of the things I like about historical fiction generally, because if the author has done a good job, even if they're embroidering a certain amount, you get the structural elements of the history really well, and it's fun. You don't have to sit there and read a history book, which I'm not especially good at, but you can still get like a pretty good sense of this, of how structural historical events took place, which I think is useful for everybody. Obviously, we both think that. But
absolutely, her research is incredible, and I mean, my dad also was a very careful researcher. My dad was also a writer, so that came fairly naturally to me. Interestingly, this morning on social media, a non-fan said about my latest book, "I hate pseudo-history, so I'm never going to read any of your books." And I thought that was a very interesting comment, because every good historical fiction writer, and I'm going to name Ben Kane, who's a friend of mine and also writes really good Roman Carthaginian stuff, we do a ton of research because actually people are paying attention. Like, the people who read our books mostly know as much about history as we do, and they'll go, that's not right. And so you should be, if you don't know the period, you should be learning something. And you can always look on Wikipedia and go, Ethiopia, people.
I had no idea. Well, like, I read a Dorothy Dunn, and then I go read up on Queen Mary, and I'm like, and then I get it all into my head, but in a way that is much more interesting to me than if I had to start with the Wikipedia.
The only problem with it, and I owe a lot to Dorothy Dunn, but I feel I have some downsides too. My whole view of all of the interactions between Queen Mary and Elizabeth and stuff forever colored by Dorothy Dunn, because her Queen Mary is my Queen Mary. So when I read that Queen Mary wasn't actually that awful, I'm like,
that's not what Dorothy Dunn said.
That's not what Dorothy Dunn said. Because I think I was 14 when I read those books.
Sure. Yeah. No, it leaves an impression.
So when we say old school, we mean old. This is from back in the day.
But I just finished reading all of the Niccolò series, and the last of those were written in the early 2000s, so they were before she passed away, so they were more recent. And one of the other great things about her, which I find this with most authors, but you really see her progression as a writer and as a kind of a scholar of human nature, and you see this progress as she writes more and gets older, and it's so much fun to experience that progression with a writer, to watch them get better at their craft.
Can I make a rant?
Of course.
Okay, so for some reason publishers believe your first novel is your best novel. It's like a giant meme in life, not just publishing. Most people go oh, F. Scott Fitzgerald. Okay, most of us are not F. Scott Fitzgerald. So for most writers, their first novel is their worst novel, and every novel after that, unless they have nothing left to say, gets a little better. And I can name a lot of people, but Dorothy Dunn is a great example. Her first novel is an excellent novel, but it is her worst novel. And as she writes more novels, she gets better at telling the stories her way. And the other thing I just wanted to say is she also has a sense of humor, and not everybody does.
A weird sense of humor.
It's weird,
but it is good. Yes.
Her main characters usually deliver half humorous, barbed one-liners that are fantastic. I used to read them aloud to my dad.
It's so true. Yeah, it's very high wit, and her wit is incredible, and she brings it out in her characters who are all, scary geniuses. Not all, but many of whom are scary geniuses, and, it's a delight to experience that, where you're I could never be this witty in real life under any circumstances. But actually, that's another one of the things I love about her, is how much she reminds us that the people of the past were just as erudite, just as clever, just as interested in being intelligent. Some of her plots are definitely a little overheated, or extremely overheated, where you're okay, calm down.
Calm down, yes.
Do they need to chase each other around for 2 whole books? But again, the payoff is always worth it, in terms of the quality of writing and plotting.
Overheated is a good way to put it.
Overheated, yeah.
But I completely self-promotional. So I have a series called Tom Swan, and there's a bunch of them, and they're really short novellas. And you can buy them on Amazon. But the point I'm trying to make is Tom Swan is literally in the same universe as Niccolò, because a couple of characters from Niccolò I've just borrowed, because she's out of copyright. So.
Well, yeah, it was funny reading. I read Tom Swan first, and then I started reading Dorothy Dunn, and then I was oh, hey!
Oh, hey!
I know him. Yeah, that's true. That's fun. All right, who's next?
Who do you want? I got to pick her. No, you picked her. Wait a
minute. I sort of forced you to pick Dorothy Dunn.
No, you pick again.
Oh, okay. Terry Pratchett. I have to say Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett definitely formed my whole worldview, because I started reading him at around age 11, and I'm so glad I did, because in terms of training you how to think, seriously, training you to have a moral, a sense of morality, they're such good books for kids, because you have to choose your age range, but teaching you about how people are and like forgiveness, understanding, again, humor, like the complexity of human relationships. He is another writer who starts off kind of rough, and I would actually say his first like 4 books are just not very good. There are differences of opinion on that, but as you know, as he progresses and he gets more and more thoughtful, gets a more complex view of the world, and like starts to really have a clear sense of what he wants you to be taking away and what he wants you to be thinking about in your life, which is missing in a lot of narratives. Like he really, like in a way, you can derive a whole ethical system from Terry Pratchett about how to treat people, you know, who you should try to be, how to organize society, and like, you know, not a lot of people do that, and it's so cool the way he does it while being funny and, you know, chill. Like they tend to be fluff, like, you know, everything is probably going to work out okay, but sometimes we all need that. You know, it's a dark world. I still go back and reread Terry Pratchett's as my, like, I'm super stressed out, I need a comfort book, you know, even after all these years.
So, hi, I'm Christian, this is Aurora. We never introduced ourselves, we just started talking. And the reason I'm going to do this introduction now is that now that you've been listening to us for 15 minutes, we've been friends a really long time, and which is odd given our difference in ages. And literally, I was introduced to Terry Pratchett by this fine woman here, who I was going to say fine young woman. But
not that young
I think
anymore.
She's creeping up on 40. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is I had skipped over Terry Pratchett for literally 20 years by the time you... And
really
I had because of the covers and because I thought they were silly, and I'm serious.
Serious.
And I don't know what my problem was, because I was instantly in love. Everything Aurora said was true, with Terry Pratchett, not with Aurora. But like, I just ate him up, and I thought Sam Grimes was a brilliant character, and
Sam
all the
Vimes.
stuff,
Sam
and all the stuff you say about morality was great, and the humor and the satire.
Yes.
The satire, and I'm not a devotee like you are, but the goblins with their pots.
Yeah, in Snuff.
If you don't know what I'm talking about,
you should read Snuff.
You need to read these, because OMG. Anyway, no, I didn't. No one had said, no one in my life, and I have all kinds of friends who are like SFF demons, and and the other very embarrassing thing is, okay, so I write fantasy novels. In case you don't know that, I could have met Terry Pratchett, and through no fault of my own, I sat down in a chair he had warmed, because we were doing back-to-back. We were doing back-to-back videos where we were doing video presentations in London, and I don't think I even saw his hat disappearing out the door. But we were like, and all I needed to do was show up 5 minutes earlier.
Damn. But you wouldn't have known how
No,
great
I
he
wouldn't.
was.
No, by then
Oh, by then you'd. Oh no.
No, this was like 2013 or
that's
something
really
like. You'd
sad.
already.
I'd already pilled you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, his books are superb, and I think the thing he does best is to suggest that in otherness is humanity.
Yes.
And like, this is a thing that I'm going to reference Tolkien, that Tolkien also does. Even with orcs, he constantly presents to you, think of in the Return of the King, the orcs who Frodo and Sam are hiding from in Mordor, who are talking...
Yeah, about eating hobbits?
Well, they're talking trash, though, and they're like... And they're obviously not that fond of Sauron, and one of them thinks his job sucks. And that instead of othering them, like they're just relentlessly evil, instead they are made real and kind of human.
Yeah.
And that is the special talent of all of those books, is that Pratchett refuses to other people. Everybody is deeply inside human, and most of them are good.
And I mean, in a way, he explores anti-racism without ever having to have any human...
Without hammering...
Well, I mean, he's hammering it pretty hard, but, like, you still have to... It's fun to read, and you still have to, like, pay attention, obviously. And I think he even said in an interview, I could be wrong about this, once, that, like, he read Tolkien and was like, who are these orc people? Like, we should look at this, you know what I mean? And that was a big part of...
My best friend in university is like, now somebody write a novel about the orcs.
Exactly. And I mean, it took him a little while to write the novel about the orcs, but he did, like, you know.
Scott Oden, by the way, has novels about orcs, just saying.
Okay.
Also a good writer.
And I can't prove this, but I bet Terry Pratchett liked Dorothy Dennett.
But we'll never know.
We'll never know. Tragically, we'll never know.
Track him down. Okay, so have you read Patrick O'Brian?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not all of them, but we can do.
Can we do Patrick O'Brian?
Definitely, yes.
To me, Patrick O'Brian is the ne plus ultra of historical writers. Now, we've already talked about Dorothy Dennett. She's the ne plus ultra of historical writers also. They have very different books. So Patrick O'Brian chose to write basically the story of things that actually happened with a handful of fictional characters. Yeah. So he does sort of day-by-day naval fiction based on logs. And he sat there at the Greenwich Maritime Museum going through the logbooks of Royal Navy ships and going, well, this really happened, and this really happened, and this really happened.
Wow.
And then he sort of turned it into a novel. That may sound cheating or easy, but the sheer authenticity of everything is unmatched in fiction. So if you want to know how people talked to each other or drank a glass of wine or what the ceremony of exchanging the time of day by two men with pocket watches, all of that meticulously reproduced in Patrick O'Brian, not to mention all the parts of a sailing ship correctly named, all the parts of a flintlock correctly named, knows how guns work. I could name a historical author who doesn't really know how flintlocks work. And knows how cannons work. And anyway, also a really good writer, and one of my best friends, well, one of your best friends too, Steve James, refers to Patrick O'Brian as Jane Austen for boys.
Yeah. So were you reading Patrick O'Brian as a kid as well?
No. I came to Patrick. Oh, can I tell an embarrassing story?
Sure.
Embarrassing story. So I was in the U.S. Navy, and I was an officer in the U.S. Navy, and my squadron skipper, we pulled into Marseille, and my squadron commander said to me, Cameron, do you read naval fiction? And I said, yes. And he said, have you read Patrick O'Brian? And I said, no. And he said, oh, because Patrick O'Brian is here on his yacht, and I'm going to visit him. And I'm like, but there's like beer, and I'm going ashore for a beer, and I didn't meet him. So I didn't meet Terry Pratchett, and I didn't meet Patrick O'Brian.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you did meet, what's her name?
Ellen Kushner. No,
the actress.
Yes, 2 days later. Same.
Sorry.
Michelle Pfeiffer.
Michelle Pfeiffer. You met Michelle Pfeiffer.
I did meet Michelle Pfeiffer, but that was 2 days later.
That's a different story.
I could have met Patrick O'Brian and Michelle Pfeiffer.
But we got distracted there. Okay, so you didn't meet Patrick O'Brian.
I didn't meet Patrick O'Brian.
And then what happened?
But my squadron skipper kept pushing the books on me.
Oh, okay.
And there was one of them in the aircraft carrier's tiny library, and it was book like 4.
Oh no. I'm like, oh no.
And that was very frustrating. And by the way, for those of you who haven't cruised around the Mediterranean on an aircraft carrier, try finding an English language bookstore in Haifa, Israel. Go ahead, be my guest. So we cruised around, and I never found the other books, but when I got home, I bought them all, and it was amazing.
But you like book 4 enough to be like, hell yeah, I want to do this? Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think I read them when I first started being friends with you, and you were like, you have to read.
Well, because that was like our training camp for living in the 18th century.
Yeah, because we used to do Revolutionary War reenacting, and
which will be another program.
A whole other program. Yeah, that's I love those books, and I think I got through 2/3 or 3/4 of them before I sort of lost track. But what I loved about him so much was how well he wrote character. Like, you know, I am less about naval battles and more about character. I don't mind a naval battle, but it's not like the point of what I read. But I still always really enjoyed his stuff. And yeah, he also gives you a good like structural overview to hang your history on. It's just a more narrow focus. Like Dunnett, she has like a huge sweeping 15th century series.
This is the politics of all of
exactly,
Europe. Yeah, Patrick O'Brian is like, this is the politics of these 4 people on a ship.
Exactly. But it is still really good. And like, yeah, again, the plotting is great. And the sense of the reality of the time is so good.
It's very powerful. I want to say something about battle scenes, because I write a lot of battle scenes. And when I talk about writing fight scenes at cons as a fantasy author, I often mention Patrick O'Brian because in Master and Commander, and this usually blows new readers away, the big battle scene, the climactic battle that you have literally waited 400 pages for, doesn't happen. It happens off camera. And so you simply hear about it with the protagonist writing a letter about who died, which is gut-wrenching because it turns out that some of the characters you loved died. And he's just anyway, I don't want to wreck it for you, but often these days, because so many of us, and this is another episode that we'll do when we talk about fighting, so many people now do things like HEMA, where they're actually fighting with period weapons, or they reenact, or they use flintlocks, that people who don't fight ask as writers, like, how do I write fight scenes? And one of the things I say is, you can always write the fight scene from another point of view or afterwards. Like, it can be the consequence of the fight scene. And I've always thought that was brilliant writing, because it's very tempting to write long fight scenes. But, years ago, and I'll shut up in a minute, but years ago, after my first big historical novel, an Australian SAS officer wrote me a thing and said, I love your writing, but if you've ever been in combat, you know that you don't remember how you did anything. You just got through it alive. And I'm like,
yeah, so then you have to think about like what POV you're doing, right? If it's first person, it should be probably a lot more messy than if it's a bird's eye. Right?
As HEMA participants, you and I at least am tempted to go, and then I parried, and then but honestly, if you and I were to go outside and spar, unless one of us did something outrageously fun or interesting,
that's true.
I wouldn't remember what happened.
Yeah, and I find this is definitely,
and that's not even our lives on the line.
Right, exactly. This is definitely a tangent, but like, when I watch, when I'm trying to get more experienced people to start analyzing their own abilities, I say, do you know what happened there? And half the time they have no idea. Not even half the time, most of the time. They have no idea what happened.
I won't name names, but I recently said to a senior student, that was brilliant. And
do you know what you did? What? Oh, no. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's a problem. So it takes some skill to be able to rerun what you did, even in a zero stress, chill spar with your friend. With your friend,
much less you were fighting for your life on the deck of a stricken warship, and afterwards you go like, I remember reading an account from a Civil War Union officer at Gettysburg who said, and then the Confederates made their third attack, and all he remembered was that at the end his pistol was empty and his sword was broken. Oh. And you're like, but that's a great line.
That's really good, yeah.
Like, you couldn't write the end of a combat better than to just say, I don't remember anything, but my pistol is empty and my sword is broken. So, if you're a writer and you're talking about writing fight scenes, have a look at Patrick O'Brien, but also Dorothy Dunn, but also Terry Pratchett.
He writes a scuffle. He writes a few scuffles very well. And then, he does have Django, which is all about war, but like, I don't know, I don't remember if they have any battles.
Monstrous Regiment of Women.
Yes, oh god, one of the best.
Also a great title.
It is a great title.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great book.
Okay, I picked one, it's your turn again.
Okay, well, I will do Bujold, which I'm sort of stealing from you, but that's okay, because we like a lot of the same writers. So Lois McMaster Bujold, who I also feel is just like a writer that people are sleeping on, and like, get it together, folks, there's this whole world out there. And she's still writing. She's written some very fun fantasy more recently. I wouldn't call it high fantasy. I would call it...
Middle fantasy?
Medium fantasy? I don't know. Anyway, it's like a very cool magic system. And she's spent a lot of time building this magic system because she wrote 3 books in this universe, 15 plus years ago. So she's really had a time to develop her system, which is very cool. She has an incredible science fiction series. This is another one where you really see her progress. She sort of started in the middle, and then she did some earlier books and some later books. But, it is...
The Vorkosigan cycle.
That's right, the Vorkosigan cycle. And, like, these books are just so mind-bendingly good. Like, some of them are really dark. One that comes to mind, Mirror Dance, I think, is incredibly dark.
Funny.
She's funny. She's incredibly funny. Some of them are like...
Even funnier if you're a veteran U.S. Navy officer, because she was too.
Sure, yeah.
She puts the knife in quite frequently.
Yeah. She has a great ability to like capture the frustration of bureaucracy.
Yep.
Everybody also has a great sense of humor. Like, her characters are so alive and so real. It's one of my great sadnesses that they never made a Vorkosigan Saga TV show with Peter Dinklage as Miles, because he would have been great. But alas, I think he's too old. And also, nobody's interested in the series, which I don't understand.
Yeah, I know.
This was actually a series that I had been, because I worked in a science fiction fantasy bookstore for most of my young life, and I had been ignoring Bujold because I also didn't like her covers. I just was like, I don't know what that is, I'm not interested.
If there's anyone from the publishing industry watching, covers really matter.
They really do.
Why do people pretend that you can't judge a book by its cover? Everyone does.
Well, you shouldn't, but we do, yeah. So you finally convinced me. You were like, no, get past those covers. And yeah, like, she's another one of my comfort reads. I have all her audiobooks, and when I'm feeling stressed out, I go back and, like, listen to the whole thing. Except sometimes Mirror Dance, because I can't. But, yeah, and then the Curse of Talion, three-book series, just splendid. And that would be more of a, again, like, high medium fantasy, but very, like, royal family, cool magic system, some good romance, some good middle-aged romance, which is nice. Though it's funny, when I
Old
first
people
read,
have feelings too.
When I first read the third book, the main character is 40, and I was like, oh, that's so cool, like a middle-aged lady having romance, and now I'm almost 40, and I'm like, I feel differently. 40 doesn't feel that old to me anymore. But yeah, she's wonderful. Anything else you want to add about?
Really love the sense of humor. Her military experience really shows, and I apologize to all the many writers out there with no military experience, but when she writes about war, whether it's the horrors of war or the logistics of war, she knows what she's talking about, and she gets it across. And sometimes less is more. Sometimes she just gives you a flash of, like, horror instead of bearing down on it. It's like, and this bad thing is part of this thing, and you're so interested in the plot, and yet you still have to go, oh yeah, war bad. And I like that. I love her medieval books, and unlike this fine person here, Aurora, I like the Sharing Knife series.
Oh, right. I always forget about that. I got over my hatred of the Sharing Knife series, but yeah.
To me, it always feels like Trek.
It's very Trek. My problem with the Sharing Knife series is that there is, like, a wildly mismatched age romance.
It's a problem.
And, like, I don't understand why she did it, and it just irritates me the whole time. And I'm always like, this is a plot device that didn't need to be there.
No,
it's irritating.
Even though I'm an old white male, it bugged the crap out of me.
It just, like, doesn't feel necessary.
No,
so
and
it's very jarring.
I remember making up for myself, like, this could have been done this way.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah. So, but
it's
true.
a damn good idea. The world building is
great.
good. And I'll just say, I think more fantasy writers could use, like, she has a whole world that's very loosely based on a sort of colonialist, vaguely North America.
Yeah,
And that's very interesting, because that's not where we usually set our fantasy novels. And
it's like a Western universe, like if you walked into a Western.
Yeah. As like if you walked into a Western, but with magic.
Yeah.
And, there could be more of that in the world anay.
It's true, yeah. No, and it's a great world, and it's all very good. It's just this one element that bugs my head.
Bugs me too.
What was I going to say about her? Also, one of the other things I love about her is because she will explore concepts on planets, because again, it's sci-fi, she has all these sci-fi, so she has a couple of, like, spin-off books, and then a couple of just, like, we go visit a planet books, where, everybody in this world has, like, immediate access to birth control. To have a kid, you have to have, like, certain amount of social credit, there are no unwanted babies, like, blah, 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 and she kind of plays that out in how it would affect a social structure. There's a planet that's only men, that they dislike women, and because she has her world has access to, like, synthetic uteruses, like, and you can build a baby in a machine. You don't need women. Anyway, and she plays that out, and it's very funny and very fun.
But like Terry Pratchett, makes you think.
It makes you think, and usually it ends up well in the end too,
yep.
which is nice.
Helpful.
Not always, but yeah, she's a gem. Let me see our time. We're at 30 minutes. That's pretty good.
That's all we're at?
Yeah.
Wow, we're fast.
We talk fast. All right, well, who should we... It's your turn.
I'm going to talk about J.R.R. Tolkien.
That's fine.
Sorry. Okay, you would think this guy needs no introduction, but I meet more and more people who've seen the movies and not read the books.
For sure.
I won't bore you with my views on the movies. Although I like them better with time.
Sure, you used to be very aggro.
Yeah.
Very aggro on the movies.
The books are much, much better. And the more I learn about real history, about Anglo-Saxon history, about whatever, the even better I find the books. So what appeals to me most, and this is banal, but I'm going to say it anymore, is the strength of Tolkien's world building. And yeah, you know, everyone says this, but it's true. He wrote the languages for his people. Yeah. And quite frankly, as a modestly successful fantasy author, I come across this all the time. I'm like, none of these people speak English. So what are they speaking? Mm-hmm. And we know in modern linguistic study that languages shape culture. So creating a world where everyone apparently speaks English, you're like, well, why don't they have our culture? Because our culture is shaped by our language. So I think that creating a language based on Finnish, you know, like we know Finnish people, they're very elven,
sure.
Was brilliant and also perfectly natural to J.R.R. Tolkien, who was some sort of weird linguistic genius.
Yeah.
And I also think that Tolkien inadvertently did some things very well. So two of them that I would highlight were, he was very religious, and he created a religion that he liked, and then made his characters mostly follow that religion, which is fascinating, because that's not the way most fantasy novels go. Mm-hmm. So I think that's very interesting, because quite frankly, in human history, most people have been religious, and so often when everybody's kind of vaguely an atheist, or when gods are like angry children who throw lightning bolts, I kind of go like,
That's another thing Bujal does super well in her her fantasy series.
Is super good.
Yeah, right? Because she integrates religion into their society in a really cool way.
But she also really understands the Middle Ages.
Yes.
And I had a professor in university who mocked a particular book by saying it was just like the Middle Ages, except it didn't have religion, chivalry, or the horse.
So not at all.
So not at all. It's what he meant. And I think that Tolkien did understand the Middle Ages, the early Middle Ages, and he sort of got it all, and that's great, but he also really understands heroism, and I like that a lot, and so my comfort read is often rereading the heroism of the hobbits, or the heroism of the elves, whatever, to each according to his ability or her ability. Like, everyone ends up doing the heroism they can do.
Yeah. Well, that is nice. Yeah. I like Tolkien. I feel like I'm coming across as a Tolkien hater. I'm not a Tolkien hater. It's just not, like, it hasn't been formative for me in a way that it has been for you.
I also think that with some... So, to me, the dark part of Tolkien, not entirely his fault, it's the world he grew up in, is it's extremely racial. It runs on races. I think we're trying to get over that now. But, you know, the idea that elves are actually racially superior to human beings is not cool. I mean, it's not a good idea.
If you play it out, it becomes dark.
It's eventually going to be bad. And orcs, racially bad. C.S. Lewis called him on that, and he tried to rewrite it anyway. I know way too much about this, but...
I mean, I think that's that's one of the things I find the most interesting, is that C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were talking about the moral quandary of, like, having a race that's lost to God.
C.S. Lewis said no good God would create a race that was doomed.
Exactly.
And Tolkien's like, oops. Or that's my understanding. Some Tolkien scholars
come
after me. But my understanding is, and that, like, this is a problem for all. I'm going to get on my fantasy writer soapbox and say, you know, if you want to have heroic action, you kind of have two ways to go as a writer. One is somebody's bad and somebody's good, so the good people get to smack the bad people. The other is everyone is various shades of gray, and in the world of shades of gray, some of the people are going to smack others of the people for really gray reasons. And while that's interesting, it's not as heroic.
Yeah.
And you know, I think smarter people than us have discussed the effect of Tolkien and maybe Star Wars on like the growth of fascism in the world, and the idea that there's good.
Having a black and white ideology has a lot of disadvantages.
Whipping out your binoculars and looking back at history, there are very few capital G good. Anyway, Tolkien. Lots of good stuff in Tolkien. I think most people agree on that. And I do want to put in this one pitch. So I think Tolkien said at some point that the main character of the whole thing, from the beginning, from the Silmarillion, is Galadriel. Like, it's Galadriel's story. And if you think, wow, a professor at Oxford in the 1930s decided to write a fantasy series about a woman. Like, sorry, not
no, that's fair. Like,
it's pretty cool.
That wasn't happening so much.
And when she gives her speech, which was cut from the movies, don't get me started, when Galadriel says, basically, like, I can see into Sauron's mind, and he can't see into my mind. Like, oh, so you're way more dangerous than Sauron. Cool. Galadriel.
That's one of the things I like about Rings of Power, which I know people are big mad about Rings of Power. I like Rings of Power, whatever.
I also like Rings of Power, so take that.
Okay. I love that, like, how much you get of Galadriel and how much, and she's a good character, and they've done a good job of showing, like, her moral complexity in her early phases and her ego, and, like, you can see kind of some of her development, which I've been enjoying.
Since we've wandered off topic,
okay,
I'm just going to say
we're going to do that a lot.
A good friend of mine says it shouldn't be called Middle Earth. It should be called, like, alternate stories that happen in a world not unlike Middle Earth.
Oh, you mean like Rings of Power? Yeah. Sure.
And I admit that's how I watch it. I just smile and go, like, Numenor, it looks freaking fantastic. Good job.
Good job.
Yeah. And I like when it touches on the actual material, I'm pleased, and otherwise they're just making stuff up.
And it's fun.
And it's fun.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Well, I think I have to talk about Mary Dorian Russell then.
Okay.
Before
that
we
seems
call
fair.
it.
Seems like a long step from Jared talking about. Okay.
I mean, yes.
No, don't worry about it. Just go. Go.
Is it? Yeah. So Mary Dorian Russell, another historical author, mostly, except she also wrote 2 of the best science fiction books I believe have ever been written by anybody.
Yeah.
The Sparrow and
We're
Children
really
of
boring
God.
if we just keep agreeing like this.
We're here to agree for this for this one. We can yell about others we don't like.
Sure.
But yeah, The Sparrow and Children of God, truly emotionally earth-shattering. Also, like, do not read these if you're not in a good place.
Yeah.
The trauma level is very high.
Feeling depressed? Read Terry Pratchett.
Yes.
Everything is right with the world? Read The Sparrow.
So maybe not for our times right now. But she's also written a couple of really beautiful, just kind of straight historical fiction. One about, oh my goodness, I'm not going to remember their names. Thread of Grace, one about Doc Holliday called Doc, I believe. And yeah, like, wonderful understanding of human nature. This is clearly what I look for in a book. Beautiful writing of character, and just, like, she explores moral complexity in the most excruciating well done way. And interestingly, one of the things I like about The Sparrow and Children of God is, like, I am very much an atheist, with some asterisks, but I'm pretty much an atheist. But she explores faith, the loss of faith, and how religion can both harm and help a person who has it in a way that I thought was just so beautiful. And since religion, as previously mentioned, is really important to the human experience, even as an atheist, I was like, this is some good exploration here.
And just so we don't always agree, I'm religious. I'm a vaguely religious Christian who goes to church on Sundays and stuff like that. Anglican, for those of you who care. And I agree completely. Yeah. So I went to Jesuit school. Some of her major characters are Jesuits. I know Jesuits. I loved the way she represented Jesuits. I loved the way she played with organized religion, both for good and other. Especially because, let's face it, we live in an era where, for writers, the easy way out is to make organized religion suck. Because it often does. I participate, and I don't doubt that. But she didn't take the easy way out. She didn't make it utterly heroic, nor did she make it utterly bad. It was human, right?
Human, yeah.
Yeah, and just a beautiful writing job. Sometimes I read a book, and I say this as a writer, and I go, wow, couldn't have done that in a million years. Sometimes I mean, I'll be arrogant. Sometimes I read a book and think, I could have done this so much better. But yeah. I read The Sparrow and literally was like, well, I quit. I'm done. I've got nothing.
No need to ever write anything again.
I'll never write a science fiction novel because this is the best science fiction novel. It is hard, though. It is hard. Did we read that each separately? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. You'd read it, I'd read it. Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah.
I didn't know there was a sequel till you told me.
Yeah. Yeah, and the sequel is also very good, but I feel like it feels like just part of the same book.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like
It should have just been an 800-page book.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, she looks at space travel in this very, like, kind of scientific, practical way.
Yeah.
She looks at, like, how other sentient species could evolve on a planet in a very interesting, different way. And, like, you know, and these are concepts that I love to see people explore. And it's so cool that somebody who normally just writes historical fiction is like, well, we're doing this now, you know. But I think, right, as somebody who does both, if you spend enough time learning about history, you can see kind of the myriad of ways that cultures develop and the myriad of ways that human societies develop. And it can really cause you to write, like some people here, excellent science fiction.
Your praise is sweet. But I just want to say how often in researching history, I find a story and think, quite frankly, this would be better as fantasy or science fiction.
For sure, yeah.
Often because it doesn't come out the way you want.
Sure, yeah.
But also sometimes because the tawdry nature of, say, 17th century European diplomacy, you really need to make it readable, you need to reduce that to like 2 or 3 nation states having a problem so that you can write this story.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, well, there's 28 nation states and
it's just like not follow. You can't follow it. Yeah.
Nobody's
unless
ever gonna
that's
get
your PhD. Nobody is reading this for fun. Yeah.
Nor do they care.
Nor do they care. Yeah. Well, I think that's probably the time we have for today.
Alistair Reynolds, sorry.
Okay, we gotta do. No, that's fair. That's
5
fair.
minutes.
Alistair Reynolds.
I don't think you love Alistair Reynolds like
I
do.
like Alistair Reynolds, but yeah.
And by the way, Ian Banks would totally be on my list.
We will have to talk about Ian Banks at another time.
But Alistair Reynolds is a current sci-fi writer in Great Britain, and if you haven't heard of Alistair Reynolds, I can't recommend him strongly enough. I am shocked by how few North Americans have heard of Alistair Reynolds. Chasm City is the book that most people have read if they've read any of his books. But he has this huge long series, and 2 things about Alistair Reynolds, and clearly one of the things you and I both value is authenticity. He's a real-life astrophysicist. So his astrophysics and his space travel and the way time works, all shockingly realistic. And his ideas of how science works and fails, very amazing. And I don't know, I admit he's not, I hate to say this because he's going to hear this someday, but damn it, Christian, because I virtually worship the guy. He's not the character writer that Mary Dorian Russell is, or Dorothy Dunnett.
Yeah.
But his world building is superb.
It's super good, yeah.
And maybe the best in all of science fiction. And
Except for Ian M. Banks, but sure.
And I just can't get enough. Well, but they're in different science fiction universes.
They are, yeah. And Ian Banks tends to be like huge scale.
And it's also 30,000 years in the future.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Anything could happen, and he doesn't have to explain anything.
No.
Whereas Alistair Reynolds is sort of trying to explain like what it would be like if human beings actually got into space, actually colonized other stars, and didn't have faster than light travel. This is a very, very cool, well realized. And by the way, he's got people just failing horribly and like...
It's hella depressing. Like, that's my problem. Like, I like Alistair Reynolds. Like, I'm always like, yeah, this is a really well-written book. It's really well-structured. I'm super interested in the plot. Except it's usually so depressing that unless I'm feeling ebullient, I'm not up for it. And I will say that he is a heavier investment. But Christian loves a heavy investment author.
I do. It's one of the things, I'll just say this as my wrap-up piece. I'm 62 years old. I will not lie to you about my age. I'm 62. One of the things I worry about modern readers is that they won't invest. When I was 14 and a huge sci-fi fantasy reader, I read whatever the bookstore had. There were no subgenres. It's like... male authors, female authors, science fiction, fantasy, epic, cozy. No, there was just like what came out at the bookstore. Andrew Norton, Robert Heinlein.
You better read
Sure.
it. Yeah.
I'll buy them both.
Yeah.
This is Mercedes Lackey. Okay, here we go.
I guess we're reading that.
Yeah. Unicorns. I'm all into
Sure.
unicorns. Like Dragon Riders of Pern. Okay, now we're riding dragons.
Yeah.
And that's how it was. And you just had to invest. And sometimes very late in a book, you'd go, well, this isn't my favorite, but on the other hand, this is the only thing that came out last month.
That's very different. Yeah.
So I do sometimes worry that we're finding it hard to invest because really good world builders like Tolkien and Alistair Reynolds take time.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I have the millennial phone addiction problem where watching like another video on TikTok is going to keep me from reading a book, which I hate but can't seem to fix. And you know, I know that that's much worse even for other people.
I have that problem too.
Yeah, they're getting us all. But yeah, like I find like you can start a book with a heavy action sequence to get people in the vibe, similar to I think how a lot of action movies start
James
now.
Bond. I call it the James Bond
James
sequence.
Bond effect, and you know, yeah, it works. It has its place. I'm not. I know you do it, and like I'm like, yeah, fair enough. You got me invested.
My name is Christian, and I am totally guilty.
Yeah. And I don't see Alistair. Well, sometimes he'll start with an action sequence, but then you're going to spend
starts with an
100 pages, right? You know.
Chasm City, you're like on the edge of your seat. Like, is this thing going to crash?
Yeah.
A good start.
Chasm City is also really cool because of the. I know we've said world building a lot of times, but like just it's like a steampunk cyberpunk combination that I really think is primo. Very nice. Yeah.
Steampunk, cyberpunk, but part of civilization is already in collapse.
Yeah, like,
so you're like
dystopic.
What?
Yeah, so it's just like a really, it's very cool. Yeah. Well, okay, I think that's what we got to stop today. Obviously, we both like Ian M. Banks, so maybe we'll talk about that another time. But go read Ian M. Banks too if you haven't already.
So if you enjoyed this, I wanted to call this in the basement. I'm going to say again, we're just going to talk about stuff. So we might
call it Christian and Aurora talk about stuff.
We don't guarantee that it'll be about books. It could be about HEMA because we're both HEMA instructors. It might be about making stuff in the basement. That's what we both do. That's when we usually talk like this. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
History, philosophy.
Yeah.
We're not going to limit ourselves.
Politics. I'm sure we're going to get to politics eventually.
Probably.
See you next time.